Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the rules of texting your ex at Christmas. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing the rules of texting your ex at Christmas. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will wonder whether or not you should text them Merry Christmas. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 rules of texting your ex at Christmas. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is generally, you shouldn't. So I'm going to be speaking through today's podcast about why initially I don't believe you should in most instances, but points 2 and 3 are going to showcase exceptions to the rule. So please keep listening through, but it's really important to start off by saying, generally speaking, if you've been dumped, I do not think you should be reaching out to your ex and saying Merry Christmas. You shouldn't be sending Happy Christmas, Happy New Year. You shouldn't be doing these things during the holiday season, because you've got to realise the positions that you and your now ex are in. Unfortunately, you know all too well that you are a dumpee, but recognise what that means. This means that your ex, the dumper, has decided to go on a new path currently without you. If they're not with you due to their choice, why do they get the benefits? And you might think, well, what do you mean by benefits? I'm just wishing them Happy Christmas. I'm trying to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all of those things. How is that a benefit to them? Well, you are giving them an ego boost. You're massaging their ego. You're pushing them on that pedestal. You're basically saying that they deserve your wishing of a Merry Christmas. Now, although I always say you shouldn't be rude to your ex, you shouldn't be horrible to your ex, even if you feel that they deserve you to be unkind due to the way that they've treated you, I don't believe in negativity. You shouldn't be doing that. If you walk past your ex and you see them on Christmas Eve, then sure, say Merry Christmas. It's the polite, respectful thing to do if you saw anybody. I always suggest that you treat your ex, in essence, like an acquaintance. You're not likely to reach out to an acquaintance that you don't ordinarily see or have anything to do with, but if you bump into them, you are likely to smile, say hi, very brief conversation, unless they try and have a longer discussion with you, and that is exactly what I suggest you do with your ex. But considering the positions, considering they have decided to end your relationship, considering they have decided to go down their own path, like I said, they have now lost gold membership of you. And gold membership of you is you showing them interest, you giving them your time, your energy, your thoughts. You shouldn't be spending your time, your energy, and your thoughts on them. Once they dumped you, they lost all of those benefits, and that includes you wishing them a Merry Christmas. Even though you might not think it's much, even though if you think, well, it's actually for me, not for them. And look, we know that. We know you're actually saying it because you're hoping you can get back together. We know that is the main aim you have. But the point is about how they would feel if you sent it to them. You're showcasing too much interest. You're pushing them on that pedestal. You're prioritizing them instead of people who deserve to be prioritized. They need to feel the loss. They need to understand that if they decide to dump you, they don't get any more benefits. They will only miss you if you are no longer in their orbit. So don't put yourself in it. Don't be that person that reaches out after they dumped you. Most of the time, you shouldn't be doing this. Now, as I said, as we go through today's podcast, there are going to be exceptions to the rule, because I don't believe that anything is just black or white. Mostly, things are different shades of grey, and we have to understand that different situations mean different behaviours are necessary to gain the best results. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you that best possible chance of getting your ex back. That's why I say, don't be rude, don't be horrible. If you bump into your ex somewhere, of course, say hi, smile, say Merry Christmas. But we're not talking about that here. We're talking about the generalised concept of whether or not you should be sending your ex a text. Should you be reaching out to them via messaging app? Should you be doing that? Well, I would suggest most of the time the answer is no. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and if you have a new hype feature, please hype this video as well. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel to keep updated. And point number 2 is if you have children together. So now we're talking about situations of when you should reach out to your ex and say Merry Christmas. And the first of these examples is if you have children together. Now, if you're listening to today's podcast and you don't have children together, still please keep listening, because very soon I'm going to be speaking about another exception to the rule, which covers all possibilities, whether you have children or not. So sit tight, we'll be there in just a moment. But if you do have children together, this is a scenario of where, in my belief, most of the time, you should be sending a text saying Merry Christmas to your ex, but not necessarily for the reason that you might think. I'm not suggesting you do it as a way to try and get your ex back via a message. No, let's think about things logically. I'm talking about a situation of where you have children together, and by the way, we're talking about younger children where you don't just speak to the child directly. We're speaking about when you have younger children of where you do have to communicate with the parent who is looking after the child during this time. So if you have a child who is 25 years old and you communicate directly, then this doesn't apply to you either. But if you have a child with your ex, and this child is going to be with your ex on Christmas Day, and you can only speak to the child via your ex, well, this is when I believe you should be reaching out to them and saying Merry Christmas. And the reason is very simple. Like I said in point number 1, it's not about being rude. If you bump into your ex, I think you should still say Happy Christmas. So when we consider this, if you are going to be reaching out to your child via your ex on Christmas Day to say Merry Christmas to your kid, well, this is when you should be saying it to your ex as well. Don't be awkward, don't be negative. It would look a bit silly, really. If you are reaching out to your ex and saying, hey, can I speak to our child, or can you just pass this on to our child, and not actually including the fact that you want to say Happy Christmas to your ex as well, it's just a bit rude, it's just a bit negative. I would suggest you send a text in your own words saying, hi, Merry Christmas, and then moving into the text you are actually going to send, whether it is just a message to pass on to your child, whether it is arranging to speak to your child, whether it is planning on when you can actually go and see your child. If you won't be with your child on Christmas Day and they're with your ex, then you need to make sure, of course, that you communicate with your kid. So this is where you have to use your common sense, and you're going to have an interaction with your ex, whether it is actually going to see them in person, but as we're saying today, beforehand, you're sending a message, you must include them in your well wishes. It looks negative if you don't, it looks silly, it looks awkward, it just doesn't sit well. And even though this is unlikely to start a chain of events of where you get your ex back due to this very Merry Christmas message, well, this could set things in motion much longer term, just by resetting the thought process that your ex the dumper has of you. If they see you in a negative light, they might be expecting you to be awkward, they might be expecting you to be negative. If you can show that you are a mature adult, if you can be grown up about this, if you can obviously want to be a good father or a good mother by speaking to your child, being the best parent that you can be, and you have to communicate via your ex, or just show that maturity and wish them a Merry Christmas as well. It might just set the record straight in your ex's mind that you're not an immature person, that you're not negative, that you're not trying to start a fight or an argument, and instead just realign the thought process they have towards you. And this could be a very slow burning moment of where slowly but surely they think of you more positively. Perhaps it might even be the first nice conversation you've had with one another for many, many months. Even if you think it's just a quick exchange of text, you say Happy Christmas, they say it back. That could be the only nice communication you've had in a very long time, and this could be that starting point of rebuilding your connection very slowly and very surely. So point number 2 about the rules of when you should text your ex Merry Christmas. Well, if you have children together, if they're a child where you have to communicate via your ex and that kid is with your ex on Christmas Day, I do believe that if you have this situation, this is when you should be wishing your ex Merry Christmas. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is if the following specific events have taken place. So now we're speaking about a caveat to the rule where I've been saying you shouldn't generally be reaching out to your ex at Christmas. Well, this is a situation where you should, but there are a number of things which need to fall into place, and therefore we need to consider all of these specific events falling into line. First of all, your ex-badumper needs to have instigated a conversation with you. So this means exactly what I've just said. They need to have reached out to you. Now, whether this has been texting you, calling you, maybe you were walking by one another and they actually tried to stop you to have a chat, all of that would count as them instigating a conversation. Now, the second part of this event structure is that the communication needs to have been positive. So if they did text you, or if they did call you, or if they did see you in the street and run over to you to have a chat, if it was negative, then this doesn't count. Okay? So first of all, we can say, if your ex didn't instigate a conversation one way or another, then it doesn't count. If they did instigate it, but it was negative, well, it doesn't count. But if they did instigate a positive chat with you, then this is moving along the right lines of what we need to see. But the final part and the most important element of the specific events which need to take place is that this must have happened during the month of December. And of course, I'm talking about December of this year. I'm not talking about last December. We're talking about December this year, meaning that this has happened in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So let's run back by one more time. If your ex-badumper during this month of December has instigated a conversation, text, call, or in person, which was positive, then I do think you should wish them a Merry Christmas via text. And the reason I say this is because if you don't, it could come across as confusing and negative. Let's just say, for instance, your ex-badumper reached out to you on the 5th of December, and it was for a positive reason. There was no real reason why they did it, but you was a bit confused. It didn't really lead to a date. You're not really sure what it meant. Was it a breadcrumb? You're not sure. But the facts are that your ex-badumper reached out to you in early December for no real reason, and it was a positive interaction. You came away from it thinking it was positive. They would have thought exactly the same. Now, if Christmas Day comes along and you don't wish them Happy Christmas, they're going to be thinking, okay, my ex-badumpy clearly doesn't want to speak with me. You know, that interaction that I started, well, it was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. And they will likely think otherwise of ever doing it again. You have to realise dumpers do take a leap of faith when they start a positive conversation. When there is no reason to do it, it's a gamble. It doesn't mean it's going to turn into a date straight away. It's testing the water, seeing how things are. And when an important date on the calendar like Christmas Day comes along, so soon after this positive interaction, if you don't reach out, if you don't say Happy Christmas, then this could come across as a sign to your dumper that you don't want to communicate. Okay? So please think about this very carefully. Like I said, all 3 of these things need to take place. It needs to be in the month of December. If this happened in September and you've heard nothing since, well, unfortunately, maybe things just aren't right in the dumper's mind to reconnect, because the likelihood is something would have grown since then, but they haven't. So this is why we're saying it's got to be in December. It's got to be recent, because otherwise we should have seen some growth in other ways anyway. But if it was in December and it was positive and it was started by your ex-badumper, then I believe on Christmas Day you should send them a text saying Happy Christmas. It shows you're interested in communicating. It shows you're not being negative. And listen, I'm only suggesting you do this for once. If they don't respond, or if it goes nowhere from this, well, you go back into using my version of a no contact rule. But for this instance, this one caveat to the rule, if you have been dumped, if your ex-dumper reaches out positively to you during the month of December, I think you should send them Happy Christmas.